Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Cambium Networks. Today's host is John Mead, and he is their Senior Director of Engineering and Product Development, and he'll be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and John will answer them at the end of today's presentation. John, I'm finished for now. Thank you so much for being with us today. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Great. Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's time. I am going to talk about Cambium's Ethernet switching portfolio. I'm going to talk a little bit about the roadmap and more specifically what new products we have coming. So I'm going to do a portfolio overview covering everything we have. I'm going to dive in kind of deep on our new TX2K switches. I'll go over the roadmap. I'll go over a feature that we have that is really differentiating ourselves from our competitors. It's a feature that our customers are really taking advantage of, and that's called policy-based automation. And then, it may be a little boring, but it's important. There's a few accessories that I want to talk about. I'll just spend a minute there, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So let me jump right into this. And here we go. So first of all, I want to make a point that, we're really more about selling solutions, not just products. I'm here to talk to you about the switching products today, but it does fit into an overall solution that we have. Wired and wireless solutions with a single point of management. The wired solution is our cnMatrix switches, which I'm talking about today. The wireless solution with our Wi-Fi APs and our fixed wireless broadband products. Now, what pulls it all together is our management platforms. cnMaestro and XMS are cloud and on-premise network management solutions that will manage all of your Cambium products with a single pane of glass. So, management made easy with hierarchical dashboards, automation, and awesome troubleshooting tools. So, today I'm focusing on cnMatrix, the wired solution. Three main things I'm going to talk about today is ease of use. So we put a lot of time and energy into ease of use on the cnMatrix platform. We're not finished yet. We're continuously adding new features and enhancing existing features to make it easier to use. Highly secure with auto device profiling, segmentation, and policy enforcement. And you get all of this with industry-leading total cost of ownership. I'll talk more about this later, but when you buy the switch, the base price of the switch gets you everything I'm talking about today. There's no additional license fees or anything like that. Okay. Our switching portfolio, we've kind of divided it up into two families of switches. We're going after two different use cases or two different deployment scenarios. We could not do that with just one switch. We would have had to have made too many compromises, too many sacrifices. So this little picture here on the right side of the page, the left portion of it is our enterprise indoor access switches. And then on the right side of the page are our switches that are meant for WISP or tower deployments. And those are the newer switches. They've been shipping since the first part of this year. And I'm going to go into those in a little bit more detail today. But across both families of switches, there's some things that you really get when you go with a Cambium solution, and that's operational efficiency, ease of use. I touched on that a minute ago. Highly secure with automated security. You can trust cnMatrix to deliver the security that you need. And this, I could spend all day talking about some of these things. I will touch on them today. Cloud or on-premise network management. Our cloud system with cnMaestro and XMS, this was created from the ground up and architected from the ground up, meant for this solution. It wasn't an existing management system that was kind of enhanced for the cloud. It was developed from scratch for the cloud. Enterprise grade L2, L3 switching, I'll talk about that a lot today. These switches that we're developing, definitely enterprise grade. They're not your local retail switch that you would get at the local retail store. Best in class total cost of ownership. I touched on that already as well. But every feature that I'm going to talk about today, it does come with the base cost of the switch, and that includes our limited lifetime warranty as well. Okay, let's dive a little bit deeper. Our enterprise indoor access switch. So, enterprise grade L2, L3 architecture, non-blocking switches. Now, for these enterprise indoor access switches, we kind of have two series of switches. We have the EX2K, which is what we started shipping originally. We started shipping these a little over 2.5 years ago. So they've been out there for a while. And these EX2K switches are kind of targeted at the mid-segment of the enterprise edge space. But we also have the EX1K series, which is slightly less features at a more aggressive price, also targeted at the enterprise space, but the lower end of the enterprise space. Now we have 12 models available. We have all the shapes and sizes that you would normally expect: 8-port switches, 24-port switches, 48-port switches. We have versions with PoE plus available. We also have versions with non-PoE as well. We also have a multi-gig switch, which gives you 2.5 gig of bandwidth. And these are for some of the more next-gen Wi-Fi access points that can use over a gig of traffic. So your typical Ethernet switch with 1 gig access won't be enough. So that's why these multi-gig switches are coming out and becoming a little more popular. On our 2.5 gig ports, we've done something that's unique and can be very useful, very practical. The PoE available on those ports are we support 802.3 BT, and we support them with 4-pair PoE, so we can go up to 60 watts on those ports. Now, on these switches, we also have fiber uplink ports. Most of these switches have 10 gig fiber uplink ports. Our 8-port switches and our EX1K switches, they have 1 gig fiber uplinks. These switches also have your typical RJ45 console port. We also have a USB port, very useful for transferring files to and from the switch. If you're nearby, local, you can upload new agent images, for example. The USB port, people also use it a lot just for charging their cell phones while they're there. So a little side benefit there. Not very common, some switches out there have it, but we have out-of-band network management ports on these enterprise switches, on the EX2K switches. It can be very, very useful. So that's an overview of the switches that we're shipping. They've been shipping for 2.5 years or so. Switching gears now to our second family of switches. These are the WISP tower switches. I'm not going to go through this in a whole lot of detail because I do dive pretty deep in the upcoming slides. But we have 3 switches: 8-port, 16-port, 24-port switches. They all have 10 gig fiber uplink. They all use removable power supplies. One of the switches actually has 2 of them, so it gives you redundancy. These switches, they're an all-in-one switch. And I'm gonna talk about this in more detail coming up. So let me back up a little bit, talk a little bit about the software capabilities on these switches. So point number 1, I've said it before: enterprise grade, layer 2, layer 3, non-blocking switches. We use a silicon-based architecture. That's how we're able to process everything at line rate. That silicon gives us a lot of advanced features: extensive ACLs, filters, QoS support, and a long list of security features as well. These switches are fully managed. Not all switches you find out there are fully managed. Some are unmanaged, some are smart managed. These are fully managed, which is what you want with an enterprise hardened solution. We have a very comprehensive CLI, nice user-friendly web GUI. Every feature is instrumented with an SNMP MIB. So if you have your favorite SNMP application, you can use that. And then as a network management system, we do support our cnMaestro cloud and on-premise, as well as our XMS. Uplinks, this might seem obvious to you, but I would take a look before you jump in and buy a switch. Our switches have 10 gig fiber uplinks on most of the models, and we have 4 of them. A lot of switches you find out there might only have 2 uplink ports, and they might be 1 gig, not 10 gig. So look out. Some switches that I know of, the hardware supports 10 gig, but you only get 1 gig unless you pay for an extra license. In our case, you get it all for the base price of the switch. Intelligent PoE. So we put a lot of time and energy into PoE, not only for our enterprise switches, but also for our WISP or tower switches. We have, multiple port switches, a healthy power budget to supply PoE to those ports. And from a software point of view, we give you complete control on a per port basis. You can view stats, the status. You can enable PoE on a port, disable PoE on port, or you can toggle the PoE. So that will automatically disable it and then automatically be enabled again. And that's in case you want to give that device a wake-up call of some type. Advanced features. We do have advanced features. These edge switches don't always come with layer 3 support. Some of the edge switches in the industry do, some do not. Some come with static routing. Some come with static routing and dynamic routing. We have chosen to offer static routing and dynamic routing. It's kind of nice. If you don't need it at first, if you don't need it at first, it's there, right? A year down the road or 2 years down the road, if you need it, you got it. So it's kind of like future-proofing your network with all these features. When we sell you these switches, it's full intention that these switches are going to stay in your network for 5 to 10 years. So we don't want you to have to forklift these switches out of your network. Another advanced feature, again, this is a topic I could spend all day on. This is policy-based automation. We call it PBA. I'll be talking about this in a few more slides here. Anyway, policy-based automation really allows you to deliver a true zero-touch experience with your switches. And last but not least, zero-touch provisioning. So when you initially deploy your switch, you don't have to take your switch off to the side and stage it before plugging it into your network. You can plug it into your network in a fully defaulted state. It will automatically communicate with our cloud, cnMatrix, and automatically go through the onboarding and registration process. And it will get the initial configuration and automatically configure that. That's half the story for Zero Touch. The other half is your day-to-day operations. Let's say you plug a device into your switch. Well, every time you plug a new device into your switch, there's some configuration that is needed. We have a way to automate that, and I'm going to talk about that as well. So everything I've talked about, you get for one all-inclusive price. That also includes your limited lifetime warranty. All these enterprise switches are 5 years. Our outdoor switches are 3 years. And you also get your Cambium support, which has a good reputation out there. We provide very good support for our products. All of that adds up to best-in-class TCO. So, deep dive on our tower switches. I have a picture of them here. These top two switches are the tower switches, and the bottom switches are a few of our enterprise switches. What else? Okay. I'm having trouble advancing slides. 1 second. There we go. So the TX2K tower switches. It's a new family of switches purpose-built for these WISP tower deployments. It's a fully integrated solution, and you will not see this with other vendors out there. But in this one switch, what do you get? Well, you get an L2, L3 enterprise-grade non-blocking switch. You also get a very flexible PoE support. So we support 802.3 standards-based active PoE, but we also support all the various flavors of passive PoE, which is what you will need for these WISP and tower deployments. And on top of that, a lot of the radios on your tower may need Cambium sync. You get that with this switch as well. So you don't have to buy multiple devices to provide these three things that I just talked about. On the PoE, a little more detail. I mentioned the 802.3 standards-based PoE that we support. We also support the low voltage or 24-volt passive PoE. We also support the 54-volt passive PoE as well. And these ports will support up to 90 watts per port simultaneously. So at Cambium, we sell a 450M, our Medusa, which takes 90 watts. So like in the 16 port version, that bottom switch in this picture, you can plug in 8 of those 450Ms simultaneously. Okay, what else do you get? These switches fully manageable with cnMatrix cloud-based network management system. Dual redundant AC and or DC removable power supplies. So I'm going to go over the different models later, but on the TX2020, which is the 20 port version, that's the switch pictured on the bottom. That one does have two power supplies, so they give you that redundancy. Extended temperature range. So these aren't outdoor switches. You can't put them in the rain, but yeah, they have to go into some type of enclosure. But their temperature range is extended, so it's hardened from a temperature range point of view. Everything I've talked about today, the software that goes on these switches, the software that goes on the EX switches, and the software that goes on these TX switches, it's the same software. It's the same code base, and it's the same executable binary. And that's important. See, these TX switches are new, a lot of new functionality, so on and so forth. But don't worry that this is a new product and will have problems. The software that you're seeing here is 3+ years old. It's been it's been shipping for 2.5 years. So it's hardened software. So you get the same software on both switches. And again, these TX switches, which are meant for towers and WISP, going out under the tower, you get a 3-year warranty on these switches. Here's a quick little roadmap just from a hardware point of view. I have a software roadmap coming up later. But from a hardware point of view, the TX2020, I'll talk about the port configuration in a minute, but the TX2020R-P, that started shipping in March, so it's been shipping for a few months now. We have the 8-port version, which is called the TX2012. It has 12 ports, 8 access ports plus 4 uplink ports. But anyway, that started shipping towards the end of May, so it's been shipping almost 2 months now. And then we have a 28-port version coming, and that's coming out. It should be shipping. We're in beta right now. It should be shipping in early September. Now, what are the differences between these 3 models? Just real quick. So I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but let's try. The 8-port version here, or the TX2012, it has 8 access ports. So these are 1 gig access ports, but it also has 4 10 gig fiber ports. The TX2020 and the TX2028, these 2 switches here, they both have 16 of these 1 gig RJ45 copper ports. But the TX2028 also has 8 ports of 1 gig fiber. And again, on these 2 models, we have the 4 10 gig fiber ports as well. Now, a big thing to highlight here is this right here. On the TX2020, we do have dual power supplies, and you can see in the picture dual power supplies, and it's very important to note you can run this switch with 1 power supply, 100% functionality with just 1 power supply. The second power supply is only there for redundancy purposes, which is very important for some deployments. Okay. So everything on this switch is located on the front panel. That was a big requirement when we went out and talked to customers. Everything is on the front panel, and I used to say that all the time. I thought, well, maybe I should show a picture of the back. So here's a picture of the back. And I wasn't necessarily completely honest. There is something on the back. Over here on the left side, that's a Kensington lock. So that's on the back. But everything else is on the front of this switch. And I'm going to walk through that from left to right to tell you exactly what is here. So here you have your console port and USB port, nothing too exciting. Then next to the right of that, you have 16 ports. So this is the TX2020 I'm showing you. There's 16 1 gig access ports. So what's the difference? 8 of them are colored green, and 8 of them are colored, I don't know what color that is, purple or pink or something. So anyway, here we go. The first 8, they are RJ45 1 gig Ethernet ports. They will provide Cambium sync out, and they all provide PoE. But the type of PoE is what's different between these ports. On the green ports, we support active base PoE and passive 54 volt PoE, and both can go up to 90 watts per port. Now, if I move over to the next bank of ports, very similar, 8 1 gig RJ45 access ports. They all provide Cambium sync, just like the first 8 ports. And they all provide PoE, but it's a different type of PoE. We use 2-pair PoE on these, which is more typical out there. So we support standards-based PoE and passive 54-volt PoE, both up to 30 watts. But what's unique about these 8 ports is we also support passive PoE, 24-volt passive PoE, and that's up to 15 watts. And depending on the deployment, you may not need any of these passive 24 volts, or you may need all 8 ports. But anyway, they are there. So we support all the different flavors of PoE. Moving, again, left to right, 4 10-gig fiber uplink ports. And then in the middle here, we have our GPS sync sources. So notice we have 2 sources. That top gold connector is for an external antenna, and the bottom RJ45 jack is a powered jack for our CN pulse. Anyway, you can use one or the other. The external antenna can go as far as 25 meters. CN pulse can go as far as 100 meters. I guess that's one big difference. So you can use one or the other, or you can use both. If you use both, it's just another way to build in some redundancy to your system. So it's kind of nice. Here's the ground terminal. Nothing special here. Just want to show you it's on the front of the box, not on the back. And then here are the dual power supplies. And again, I want to make it clear, you only need one power supply. You get 100% switch functionality with one power supply. The second power supply is only meant for redundancy purposes. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the competition. How do you deploy these things today? So without these new switches that I'm talking about, let's go through a little example. So I have 4 radios in your tower that you want to connect, and let's assume that those 4 radios need to be powered up via PoE, and they need Cambium sync. So what do you do today? Without the TX2K, you would use something called a mid-span device. So a mid-span device is what's known as a multi-port PoE injector. So we all know what a PoE injector is. A mid-span device is a PoE injector on steroids, right? It has multiple ports, and it also provides Cambium sync. So these mid-span devices, you can get them from a few different vendors. Cambium has one. It's called the cnM5, and that's a mid-span device. You also need, your favorite Ethernet switch of choice. The point here is that you need both an Ethernet switch and this mid-span device. You may need additional power injectors if the mid-span device can't handle it. It's a mess, right? With all the extra cabling, all the extra devices that you need. And this is how it's done today for an environment that needs Cambium sync and PoE, so on and so forth. Now I'm just showing 4 radios. You might have 4 or 8 or 12 radios in your tower. But with a TX switch, what do you do? Well, for one thing, you no longer need the mid-span device. Also, so this Ethernet switch on the left, it's now a TX2K. That the TX2K, as I told you before, it has the PoE you need, and it has the Cambium sync you need. So no more need for the mid-span device. You kind of get rid of that, and it significantly simplifies your deployment. Okay, let's compare us to the competition. So the basic needs are, you need some PoE for your radios, passive 54 volts. You might need passive 24 volts. We have them both. Cambium sync, yeah, the TX2K switch has it. And you know what? The competition has those 3 things also. But that's where it stops. We also have a redundant source for Cambium sync, so it gives you a little bit of redundancy. We also support standards-based PoE. These mid-span devices from competitors do not. So what's next? So enterprise-grade L2, L3 switch, yes, that's all included in 2020. In the competition boxes, they are not. You have to buy another switch to do that. The fiber uplink ports, yes, we have them. These mid-span devices do not. Our box is fully managed. Not only is it fully managed, but it's also managed with cnMatrix. So you can use the same management plane to manage your switches and your radios in that one deployment. So all-in-one solution, we have it all in one box. I keep talking about that. Competition does not. Dual redundant power supplies, yes. Competition kind of does, kind of doesn't. And price. So you look at all this green and you think, oh my goodness, your box is going to be so much more expensive. It's not. If you look at a full solution, so in this price, I've included the CRPS, the power supply. If you look at the competition, there's one solution out there that you can get for a pretty low price, still a little bit more than ours, but it has some shortcomings. And then there's some solutions out there. They are kind of nice, but they're double the price. Anyway, so compared to our competitors, we're looking pretty good. Have several advantages. Roadmap. So where are we on the roadmap? So I'll go through this quickly. We shipped our 4.0 release in March, and that's what supports these new TX switches. Have some cool features that came with that, cable diagnostics. We came out with another minor release in May. This was actually a really good release. It provided support for the new 8-port switch, also had some new software features. PBA is a big feature for us, and we're continuously enhancing that. We also came out with a really cool feature called device auto recovery. That's where if you enable this feature, if we detect that a device is no longer responding, we will automatically toggle the PoE power to that device, which will give that device a wake-up call. 4.1, this is a software-only release, no hardware associated with it. The 4.1 software does have the hardware support for an upcoming piece of hardware, which I'll show you. But anyway, this is a pretty big release for us. We have Mac-based authentication built into this. You can dynamically create your VLANs with radius attributes from your radius server. We do have IPv6 router advertisement, and the list goes on and on. And then in September, which I told you before, that's when we release the hardware. So this is when the TX 2028 RF-P comes out. The software will have already been released, and it's here in the July timeframe. This is just released last week or the week before. That's our 4.1 release. In December, we do have a 4.2 release coming out. There's some new hardware coming out that I'm not ready to talk about yet, but it has a long list of software features as well. Change of authorization, Q&Q, and we're now going to support IPv6 static routes as well. This slide kind of summarizes what I just talked about with each of the releases. A little bit more details. But anyway, I won't go through this slide again since I repeated it already. Now, PBA, policy-based automation. So we're getting a lot of traction with this feature. Customers are loving it. They've decided, I'm buying matrix switches. And it's because of ease of use. It makes it so much easier for you to manage and monitor and deploy your switches. We're even getting traction with the analysts on this feature. They are taking note of it and putting it in their write-ups. So I'm not going to do a full PBA overview. I could spend all day. I do demos and so on and so forth. If anyone's interested in more detail on this, please, contact Julie and we can set up a separate call. So let me start by defining the term zero touch. You ask 10 people what zero touch means and you'll get 10 different answers. So here's my answer for zero touch. So zero touch means automating the configuration that you would normally do manually. So if you can automate it, then it's zero touch. So a little more details. When you're configuring a switch for the initial deployment, there's a few things you want to do. Static VLANs, which ports are you going to be uplink ports? Are you going to have some type of port channel or link aggregation? IP addresses, are you going to get your IP addresses from DHCP or are you going to statically allocate them? So these are some of the things that you want to do on your switch kind of before you deploy that switch. And how do you automate this configuration? Well, we do it today with cnMaestro. And I mentioned this before, when the switch plugs into the network, it will go out and find cnMaestro automatically. It will go through the onboarding and registration process, and it will download this initial config file. So you can initially, your switch will get initially configured automatically. Okay, so that's zero touch. You take the switch out of the box, you plug it in, you're done. So this is what zero touch means to most people, but I don't stop here. I think that's only half the story. The second half of the story is, what about the configuration that you need for ongoing network changes, right? When you start connecting devices into your switch, every time you connect a device into your switch, there is a little bit of configuration required on that switch. And how do you automate that configuration? That gets tough. Not very many switch vendors can do that. But here's some examples. You connect an access point. You know, that access point is going to be on one or more SSIDs, which are tied to VLANs. So you got to configure VLANs on your switch. You might want to configure QoS settings, security settings. There's a half a dozen other examples of what you might want to do. And not just for APs, for any device. You know, you connect a video surveillance camera. What VLAN do you want that video surveillance camera to be on? You connect something simple like a printer. There's some configuration on your switch associated with that printer. And then I can start listing IoT devices, like the thermostat that's in your office, or, you know, all kinds of things. And for all those devices, there is some configuration needed on the switch. So it's not just about connecting devices. What about when you remove a device? Well, when you remove a device, you don't want that configuration that's on the switch left there, just dangling VLANs open on a port. It's messy from a configuration maintenance point of view, and it's a security risk. So how do we solve these things? How do we automate everything I just talked about so that we can consider it zero touch? Well, that's what this feature PBA is all about. With PBA, you can automate everything I just talked about. Let me kind of summarize what PBA can do for you. Number one, it will automate the adds, moves, and changes of networking devices. So when you add in an access point, well, not just one access point, how many do you have in your network? 10, 20, 100? You can automate that. So everything is just plug and play. Now, this is a big one. When you are configuring your switch and you're typing in those COI commands, that's half a dozen or 10 COI commands that you're going to enter, and they're easy COI commands, but it's so easy to fat finger that. They say that 80% of network outages are due to misconfigurations. But anyway, with PBA, it eliminates the manual configuration, the error-prone and time-consuming manual configuration. So this right here definitely simplifies and reduces troubleshooting of your network. Next, every port is treated equal. So PBA, the way it works is you as a network administrator will create these policies. And a policy, it first has two components. It talks about how to match a device or what type of device you want to match, like an access point. And then once it identifies that, then it has a list of actions that you can take. So since the policy PBA feature is doing that for you, you don't have to worry about which port you plug your device into. When you plug in a video surveillance camera, you can plug it into any port you want. The PBA feature will detect it on that port, and then it will execute that policy. It enhances security in many ways by auto-segmenting these devices. You plug in a device, the PBA policy automatically knows what VLAN it's supposed to be on or subnet, and it will automatically put it on that VLAN for you. In the end, kind of high-level summary statement, it reduces the expenses required to deploy, manage, and maintain your network. All right, I'm going to give you an example of PBA. So when I give demos, I have a switch and I have like one access point or maybe two access points, or maybe I'll have one or two video surveillance cameras. But in the real world, we're not talking about one or two devices, right? In your network, let's say you have 20 switches and you want to hook up 200 video surveillance cameras. And maybe you also want to hook up 100 access points. So how do you automate that? How do you automate the configuration of the switches? So you will need two PVA policies. You create one for access points, and you create one for the video surveillance cameras, and you're done. Creating a policy is easy. I could demonstrate it to you. It takes like 1 minute to create a policy. But anyway, once you have those policies in place, if you create those with cnMaestro, those policies get pushed automatically down to every switch in your network. And now you can plug these access points and cameras into any port of any switch on your network. So you're ready for deployment. Connect the cameras and APs into any port of the switch. These VLANs will be auto-created. The QoS and security settings that are part of that policy will be automated. The port mode will be set automatically. And also port naming is another example of something that can be done automatically, which is actually a very nice feature. But anyway, you create those two policies, and after that point, you physically plug in the devices, and everything is 100% zero touch. So the example I just gave, this is kind of more for enterprise switches. I have the exact same example for a tower switch. So instead of access points and video surveillance cameras, let's say you're hooking up two different types of radios, PTP radios and PMP radios. So it's the exact same example. You need two policies, one for the PMP radio, one for the PTP radio. Those policies will define what actions to take when they're detected. And you're ready for deployment. You plug in the radios into any port of any switch, and away you go, 100% zero touch. All right, quick rundown on these accessories. So first of all, I talked about these removable power supplies. So we have 6 of them. We support AC supplies and DC supplies. The AC supplies do not come with a power cord. So whatever country you live in, you need to provide the correct power cord, which we do sell as accessories. On the DC versions, we do include the DC cable necessary. These are 3-meter pigtail terminated connector cables. And if you look at these power supplies available, the bigger one is 1200 watts. That's a lot of current that goes through there. So these cables that we sell, they are spec'd out for that much current. Anyway, these supplies AC or DC, anywhere from 600 watts total or 500 PoE budget, 500 watts of PoE budget, up to 1,000 watts of PoE budget. So when you plug in these radios that are very power hungry, no problem. We can support that. We can support it with just one power supply. So if you want redundancy, you can just plug in 2 of those power supplies. Here is the GPS sync source options. Here's the GPS antenna, and also Cambium's CN Pulse device as well. And then last but not least, and we've had these for a long time, but I'd like to talk about it. I keep talking about these fiber uplink ports that we have. The transceivers that you need for those, you can buy those from your favorite vendor, no problem, and we will support it. We absolutely recommend that you buy from a trusted vendor, or you can buy them from us. So anyway, we have all the different types that you would need, 10 gig and 1 gig, long reach, short reach, so on and so forth. And we have copper SFPs as well. And these are high quality transceivers, priced aggressively. You will like the prices of these as compared to our other competitors. And that is it for today. That's all I had. I ran a little bit late, but I still think we can go longer for Q&A if there's any questions out there. So Julie, back over to you.
Thank you so much, John, for that wonderful presentation. I definitely have some questions for you. Let's get started with the first one. Also, some of the questions you may have answered or partially answered, but if you don't mind, we'll touch on a few more if you don't mind. First one, regarding XMS Maestro, what is there a cost associated with that?
Yeah, thank you, Joy. So our cloud management platforms, we have 2. So one is called cnMaestro, and one is called XMS. XMS is a solution that costs extra and has licensing associated with it. And by the way, you can manage your enterprise switches that I talked about today with XMS. XMS does not support our tower or WISP switches yet. And all of our tower and WISP switches are supported by cnMaestro. So for the tower and WISP switches, I would go with the cnMaestro option. Now, cnMaestro, to answer the question, there are a couple different versions. There are cnMaestro Essentials, and for the switches, the Essentials version gives you everything you need, and the Essentials version is free. So there is no extra cost for the Essentials version of cnMaestro. If you want to buy cnMaestro X, which is the higher end version, it gives you some extra capabilities on some of the other Cambium products. If I could give you an example, like when you're looking at stats, don't quote me on this, but I believe with the Essentials version, you get 7 days history of stats. With the cnMaestro X version, that does cost a little bit. There is a licensing associated with that. You get longer, more history, more historical views on stats. That's just one example. But the Essentials version is great, gives you support for all the features I talked about, and it is free. Sorry for the long answer on that one.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much, John. Next question for you. Can one set up a static IP / port forwarding within the Cambium device, or would that person be stuck with with that on the end of the ISP? This is in order to avoid additional cost for the static IP. In other words, if I can configure my their own with the proper device.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me try.
Okay.
If you're asking for NAT is address translation capability that you would use, for example, in your home or something like that. So your ISP gives you one IP address, and then the box, the switch will perform NAT so that you can give out multiple addresses to the multiple devices in your home. That's one example. This is an enterprise switch. And it does not support NAT. There is meant to be, an upstream router of some type that would perform that service for you. I'm not sure if that's what the question was, but that's how I interpreted it.
No problem. Thank you, John. Yeah, you're the expert here. You may have already answered this. Somebody is asking here: do all Cambium switches have PoE?
Yes, they do. And 80%, well, don't quote me on that, but a very large percentage of our sales are PoE. There are deployments where you don't need PoE, but PoE is extremely common. When I was talking about our enterprise switches, I said we had 8-port versions, 24-port versions, 48-port versions. For each one of those, we have a PoE version and a non-PoE version. So if you need PoE, we got it. On our tower switches, they all support PoE. We do not have a non-PoE version of the tower switches.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Next question here for you. Does Cambium have tower switches with NVR surveillance combos on the same cnMaestro login?
I am sorry. If you could email me that question, I'm not following that question. I don't understand what you mean. I apologize.
No problem. I'll just go to the next one. Could you explain briefly what the limited lifetime warranty includes for these switches?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I knew more details on it. So, on the TX switches, they are meant to be hardened and meant to be put out in the elements inside of an enclosure box, right? They're not IP67. They're not rainproof. But in these enclosure boxes, it can get quite hot out there or quite cold, and we are hardened from a temperature point of view. So on these outdoor environments with these TX switches, it's a 3-year warranty. And what that means is in 3 years, if you have a problem, we will help you with that problem. And if the switch fails, we will replace the switch. For all the enterprise switches, both the EX2K series and the EX1K series, that's a 5-year limited warranty and same conditions.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Next question here for you. For clarification, the dual redundant AC and DC removable power supplies for cnMatrix TX2K that you said are purchased as accessories, does a customer need to purchase them separately, or are they included in the package?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and I try to make it clear. So it's a good question. When you buy a switch, it does not come with a power supply. We would have had to have made too many different versions, and from an inventory and storage point of view, it would have been too hard. So there's 6 different flavors of the CRPS power supplies. And so you buy whatever kind you want, you buy that separately, and then you buy the switch separately, and you match them up that way. So they are not included with the switch.
Thank you so much, John. Next question, you may have answered this one already. Are all ports on the switches PoE, or are some just passive?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm assuming that question is related to the TX switches. And on the TX switches, all ports are PoE, but it's not equal. So I had half the ports are colored green and half the ports are colored purple. The green ports are implemented with 4-pair PoE. And what that means is we can get you more than 30 watts. And in this case, we can get you all the way up to 90 watts. So if I use an example on the TX 2020R-P, there's 16 of those RJ45 ports. 8 of them are colored green, and they can support 4-pair PoE, and they can support it from a standard space point of view. So that would be 802.3 AFAT-BT. And from a standards point of view, you can get all the way up to 90 watts. Or on those same green ports, we also support passive 54 volts, which is needed for some of the radios out there. And that also can provide up to 90 watts. Now that's 8 of the 16 ports. The other 8 ports that are colored purple, they can provide up to 30 watts using standards-based PoE, or up to 30 watts using passive 54 volts PoE, or they can also support the low voltage passive PoE, which is the 24 volt passive PoE, which is required by some of the devices at Cambium need that, but a lot of third-party devices need that as well.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Next question here for you. How many radios can be attached per switch on each tower?
So I'm going to use the same switch as an example. So the TX 2020 has 16 RJ45 1 gig copper ports and 4 10 gig fiber ports. So theoretically, you can use all 20 ports, but let's break it up into 16 and 4. So for the 16 ports, every one of them can be plugged into a radio. And simultaneously, every one of them will give you the power that you need and will give you the Cambium sync that you need. Now, when I say power, it depends on which bank of ports. Is it the first 8 or the second 8, right? So the first 8, the previous question, the first 8 can give you up to 90 watts per port. The second 8 can give you up to 30 watts per port. Now, this 30 watts per port, and 99.9% of all switches in the world today support up to 30 watts per port. Supporting more than 30 watts per port is a relatively new thing. You need either 802.3 BT, which is the new standard, or you need a 54 volt passive. But what's important is that you have to implement that port with 4-pair PoE. That's what you really need to get more than 30 watts. And anyway, we do support that. So anyway, all 16 ports can simultaneously support radios. The 4 fiber uplink ports can also be connected to radios, but we can't power up those radios. The radios have to be powered up via another mechanism, their own DC power or something, which is very common, by the way.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Can you direct us the best place to look online for any further either technical information or I would imagine Cambium's got training videos for all of your latest equipment and that sort of thing if one wants to look further at your products?
Yeah, so the Cambium site has a lot of this stuff. So cambiumnetwork.com, navigate to products. Within products, navigate to the cnMatrix switches. And throughout there, you can look at various levels of detail. You can look at the EX switches, the TX switches, or you can look at one specific switch at a time. But there's some document folders in there that will have the stuff you're looking for. We have a couple cool documents. We got your basic user's guide, but we also have like a port configuration guide, which goes into more detail about the PUE on these TX switches, because it is kind of, we do support so many different flavors. So that port connectivity guide is a big help. So there's some nice documents there, but there's not enough. We have ideas for a lot more documents and more videos that we want to do. So keep checking back. We'll be providing more documentation over time.
John, thank you so much for answering all those questions for us today. And also thank you to everyone for attending today as well. And if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to review any of the products mentioned or shown today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And also please remember that this presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel so you can view it again. Thank you, everybody. John, thank you so much for your time and all your valuable information today. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Julie.
John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.